Good evening, everyone. I know that's the theme music for the Today's Focus podcast series, but this is not technically an episode of Today's Focus. I'm not here to really have you focus on anything specifically. I've simply turned on the microphone so that I can focus on making sure everything is working okay. Earlier today, well, as many of you know, I'm still trying to navigate and figure out the future. So I'm looking forward to the future. And I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way. It's Monday, February the 19th, 2024. It is currently 8:07 p.m. But as many of you know, I've been looking to the future. What is the future of this podcast? Are we going to make it? Will people support it? Will people, give $5 a month, $10 a month, $8 a month, $4 a month, $3 a month? And we definitely have had, a number of people step up and they're offering their support. We will see how things play out as we go from February into March. I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to be. But so as I'm continuing to try to navigate and figure out the future of this podcast slowly but surely will no longer be a part of a church. It's going to be a standalone podcast. It's going to be completely supported by the listeners. If the listeners support it, it survives. If the listeners don't, it goes away. It's that simple. If people want the podcast, great. If they don't, it's just, the first month, it's not supported, then I'm just going to delete everything and be done with it. I mean, that's my only choice. Or I'm going to be dedicating hours of my time and my money. And well, that's just it's not going to be sustainable at that point in time. So we will see. So the future of this podcast is still very much up in question. I feel positive about it. I feel that we have turned somewhat of a corner. I definitely have heard from more people in February about supporting the podcast than I have had in any single month prior to February. All right. So that's a good sign. That's a positive sign. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that means. How is that going to work out? And we will see. We'll keep moving forward. But in the meantime, I'm trying to figure out, the future for me, right? And I know this. I definitely know this about me. As much as possible, I at least feel at this point in my life, I still want the opportunity to turn on a microphone and to be able to podcast. I want the opportunity to be able to talk about what's going on in the world in my own unique way. And just as I tried for almost 24 years to really take the typical format and template the way you're supposed to do church. And I kind of just burned that down and said, we're going to do something far different. We're going to not just learn theology. We're going to do theology. We're going to go in depth. We're going to do things in a radical different way. People are going to actually be participating and not passive listeners and all the things that we have done. Now, I tried that for, almost 24 years. We're almost at 24 years. And look, I have no problem acknowledging February 2024, the reality has set in. That experiment, that approach failed miserably. Okay. It failed miserably. And then when you come to my approach to theological podcasting, once again, I've taken the template and I've thrown it in the trash can. I've burned it to the ground because you're supposed to, if you're going to do theological podcasting, you've got to make it very clear which team you are on, right? You got to represent your team. You got to wear those colors. You got to let everyone know you're on team Reformed or team non-Reformed. You're in team dispensational. You're in team amillennial. You got to pick your theological team, and then you've got to appeal to that team. You got to give the people what they want, because if you can, you probably can build up support, not only to support your podcast, probably to make a little money. You maybe even to build up enough support that you can well, you can have some kind of a club, right? Hey, you can be in the Reformers Club. And if you give $50 a month, I will chat with you and you can get an extra episode, or all the different things that many theology podcasts do. Or I can have a Patreon page and people can support me that way. You can do that, but you've got to make sure you figure out your team, and you got to build that team, and do not deviate from the team. Well, we know I don't follow that rules. I don't care. I'm going to talk about theological issues, and I don't care who gets offended. I don't care if liberals get offended. I don't care if conservatives get offended. I don't care if team reform gets offended. I don't care if team non-reform. So once again, I have burned up that template. And let's just be honest. My approach, once again, has proven probably not to be the smartest idea, right? If you're going to have a theology podcast, you have to pick your team, right? But because I don't pick my team, someone will start listening to me, and then, they get offended. They get mad because I don't stay with their particular team. So once again, that makes it hard to support this podcast. So that means there's still a lot of things we're trying to figure out about what the future is going to look like. Now, as far as the podcast is concerned, that has been far more successful than maybe my other endeavor that wasn't so successful, right? Because I've taken the Theology Central podcast and we've made it to the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. That is pretty good, with an anonymous podcast that's not based off personality, but is trying to talk about theological issues, not beholden to a team, right? And trying to challenge, and we talk about anything and everything and all the different things we've tried to do. So I've been somewhat successful with that, but still not so successful to kind of build up the kind of support that many theology podcasts do. So, I'm not going to put content behind a paywall. I'm not going to do all of that stuff. And I'm definitely not going to monetize. So that means, okay, we still got to figure that out. So while I'm trying to figure all of that out, today, I spent not a lot of time, but some time trying to plan out my next possible maneuver, my next possible plan, right? And I'm like, okay, since obviously I believe 2024, I think the Theology Central podcast will become, a standalone podcast. I don't know how that's going to play out in the future. Don't know if people will support it, not support it. Okay, I'll have to figure that out. But if it goes away, I know I still want to be able to sit in front of a microphone and talk about issues, and in my own unique way, which will be not beholden to a specific agenda, not beholden to a specific template. I don't want to do things the way everyone tells you have to do things. I'm going to once again kind of burn down the format, burn down the template, and do things my own way. But I still want that ability to do so. So here's what I'm going to do. And so this is why I'm doing this broadcast tonight, because this is simply kind of an update and a test. So I was doing a test today on looking for other platforms, because I am at least going to have the infrastructure ready to go, right? And I may even start utilizing it to build another podcast from the ground up. This will be kind of like my third time, well, kind of my fourth time, because I've done an experiment before. A year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't even remember anymore. I was challenged by someone, hey, you've taken a podcast that's not personality driven. You've taken it from nothing, and you've gotten it to, I think at that point, in the top 10% of all podcasts. But it's all theological based. Why don't you try to do one that's not theological based? Try to do a more secular focused podcast and see what happens. And I did. I created one. And that one actually at one point was the number one trending podcast on Spotify. It was on charts all over the place. We even had a sponsor for a temporary period of time and made a little bit of money. And then I was on that on number one. I mean, we were beating, major podcasts until Michelle Obama came along, and then she knocked me out of the number one spot. Now, at that point, there was discussion about, okay, what do I do here? Do we go all in now? What do we do? Do we create social media accounts? How do I maintain this and build it? And what is it going to take? But it was all just a dare. And so then I'm like, well, if I keep doing that, Theology Central is going to go away because this is going to require all of my time. So I stepped back to dedicate all of my time and my focus on the Theology Central podcast, which then that took us from the 10% to the top 5%. So it was the right decision. So I'm glad that I did that. And with all of my other, things working on with the church and all of those things. So now that things are changing and I don't necessarily 100% know the future of this podcast, what I'm thinking of doing is taking another podcast, starting from the ground up, or the bottom, starting from the ground level, and start building. And what we're going to probably do is then that one is going to be, it's going to be obviously not theologically driven. It's going to be, I'm going to talk about anything and everything, because I never want to lock myself into one thing. I cannot stand that. I don't know how people can you talk about literally the same thing, even with my theological podcast. Look at all the different things we do. I'll talk about current events one second. We're doing a Bible study the next. We're doing a devotional message next. We're talking church history next. We're talking about this. We're talking literally, you never know what's getting ready to happen from day to day, right? And I just kind of let whatever happens takes us in our own direction. Well, I'm going to do the same thing from a much more secular perspective. And I think we're going to call it Unfiltered World, or the World Unfiltered, something along those lines. And the idea is I'm not going to have a filter. In other words, I'm not going to have a specific agenda. I'm not going to have a specific ideology. We're just going to talk about anything and everything with offense to friend or foe. We're going to speak of the world exactly as it goes. And that's going to be the world. It could be any topic on any given day, on any given subject. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to build that up, or start it, get the infrastructure ready, try to get artwork, things ready, description, maybe find, I don't know, I may use the theme music that I just played here. Who knows? Because I've already paid for it. Won't have to spend any more money, monetize it, and then advertise it here to maybe get people to do that. And then that could possibly, I don't know it's going to take a while. That's the problem. You got to be so patient with podcasting. You got to be patient. You got to go in for the long haul. You got to go in, and maybe that could then help support this. I don't know. I don't know if it could. I don't know if it would. I don't know if it will. We don't know. Obviously you want this just to be supported by the listeners, but we'll have to wait and see. But the bottom line is I want it ready to go so that if I wake up one day and I'm like, you know what? Theology Central is now a listener-supported podcast. The listeners have spoken. They don't want the Theology Central podcast around. So I'm going to cancel it because I'm not going to. I'm dedicated to this. I do not want the Theology Central podcast to turn into where I have to spend every month coming up with a unique way to ask and help and try to ask and try to help find a way to get people to give and basically to beg and plead. No, I'm not going to do that. That's just miserable. That's embarrassing. It's humiliating. It's just, no. So I've kind of stated the reality of the situation. I'll state it a couple more times because over the next 4 to 8 months, there's going to be, lots of changes behind the scenes. And so as this moves away, already some changes are already starting to take place slowly but surely, because again, this is going to be now just a standalone podcast, 100% supported by the listeners. That's never been the case in the history of it. So it's going to be in a unique position. And at that point, if it goes away, because I'm not going to beg and plead. Once it goes away and I wake up and I'm like, that's it, delete. Boom. I delete it. It's gone. I'm not wasting any time. It's just going to be gone. I'm not saving anything. It's just not going to exist again. At that point, then I want to have the backup. So that I can then be ready to go. And I'm already doing things for it. So we will be talking more about that. Depending on how things go. There's a part of me that doesn't want to do that because that will slowly but surely pull away from this. And I would rather spend all of my time and hours and however many years I have left really focused on this, but you got to pay your bills. You got to pay your bills, right? And I just can't see. I know so many Christian podcasts do it. Oh man, so many. It drives me crazy. They have different levels of support. And if you give this much money, you get 3 episodes. Some of them will give you a free episode, but it's 30 minutes of an hour-long podcast, and they only give you the first 30 minutes. There's all these ways they do so in order to raise money. And I'm like, I'm not going to place theological concepts behind a paywall. I'm not going to take the teaching and preaching of God's word and put it behind a paywall. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to monetize it. We did a little experiment in 2023 with the Bible Pop Quiz podcast, right? A little experiment. We monetized that for it was easy to be able to get commercials. The only problem is within 5 minutes, the commercials were, to say questionable was an understatement, right? It was the Get Lucky Casino, right? And I'm like, that's not, and their commercials definitely had double meaning. And I'm like, okay, that's not working, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the problem if you monetize it. So, you don't want that either. So, and you don't want to monetize a theological, you don't want to do any of that. So your only option is either you're funded completely by a church or you're funded by the listeners. So that's the direction we're moving. So the other, if I do the other podcast, which I'm starting to build, then guess what? That one I'm gonna monetize. I'm gonna monetize it to death is what I'm going to do, and then we will see. And then we'll see how many people who listen to this podcast on a regular, consistent basis wants to check out the other. We will see. It's just we have a lot of uncertainty moving into the future. But the point is, as I was messing around with this idea, trying to build this from the bottom, I was testing out Spotify for podcasters. Spotify for podcasters, which is its own podcasting platform. They have their own software to be able to record and be able to do things. And so while I was messing with that, and I was messing with our OBS studio software that we use to broadcast live on Sermons 2.0 and Church 1, I had to change some settings. And once I changed the settings, I was like, oh no, I think I just messed up all the settings for Church 1 and Sermons 2.0. I don't know what's going to happen. So I had to go live tonight. One, to kind of give you just a little update. That's what's happening. And then, we wanted to just make sure everything was working right. We just wanted to make sure things were working right. Now, I know most broadcasters would just have a little picture on the screen that says testing and not say a word and just be silence. But, I don't, if the microphone's hot, if the microphone's live, I'm talking, ladies and gentlemen. So I wanted to do that and get that out of the way. This really fits in perfectly with the broadcast we did earlier today about frustrations, overcoming greater than the greatness of Christ. And we talked a little about that. I gave you a very important theological assignment, and we talked about theoretical theology versus practical theology. So that was that. This one kind of carries that on because of that frustration and because of the things that are going on. That's what's leading me to try to possibly start a new endeavor so that I can possibly support and fund things. That's the worst part about all of this. That is the worst part about all of this. Is to simply turn on the microphone and try to provide people spiritual food multiple hours a day, which is what I attempt to do. I mean, you look at how many, episodes I can put out in a year. That one year I put out, over 3,000 episodes. Some years it's over 2,000. Probably every year it's over 2,000 episodes. Crazy amount of content. On one hand, that's great because you wanted it to be a situation where people almost multiple hours a day, they can grab their phone or whatever, and there's content available. Everything from theological discussions, church history, you name it, biblical studies, Bible study exercises, you just devotional, you name everything. And you want to be able to do that. But the problem is everything costs money. The microphone I'm speaking into you costs money. The computer that I'm looking here to my right cost a lot of money. I'm currently broadcasting, or I'm recording on the Spreaker software. All right. That we downgraded that to the 0 plan today. And then I just realized that was not going to work. So I had to upgrade it to the $20 a month plan, which that's frustrating. And then, of course, to be broadcasting on Sermons 2.0 and Church One, that's $60 a month. So and it's just frustrating that's the way it works, but that's the way it works. So we will see what the future looks like. I'm hopeful. But even if it all blows up, then I hope, and I'm prepared, that I can still sit in this chair in front of this microphone, looking at this very computer, and be able to at least once again engage in an activity. I mean, I've been broadcasting, literally 23 years. I'll take that back. I've been broadcasting, 25, 26 years? 27 years? Because it started with making cassettes and then advertising them for free. And then we sent them out for free. Right? So it started with recording cassettes. Then it went to, I was on Christian radio, got kicked off Christian radio because I ticked off everybody. All right. And so, yeah, almost 26, 27 years. That's a long time sitting in front of a microphone. A very long time. And I've seen everything. I've seen all the changes come, and I've seen all the changes happening. I'm watching the changes that are currently happening in the podcasting world. You have a lot of things happening, right? So, yeah, I'm still navigating all of that. Still trying to figure all of that out, and we will see where it ends up. But hopefully, when I hit stop here in a minute, first, this should immediately be uploaded to Spreaker. So that should be done and be on all your favorite podcasting apps within 2 to 3 minutes. So that should happen just instantaneously. Boom. Then I am going to grab the recorded file that is archived for Sermons 2.0, Church One, sermon audio platform. And I'm going to make sure that this was saved correctly because that's the settings that I changed. So I'm going to make sure that that's in the format that's correct. If it isn't, then I'll know. So I just wanted to take, we've taken 22 minutes to ensure that this is all good to go, give you a little bit of an update, and then we'll see. And then hopefully, I don't know if I'll do a late night broadcast. I don't know. Maybe I'll do something. Maybe around 10 p.m. I'll do a late night broadcast. And then tomorrow, hopefully we can get a lot knocked out. And then hopefully Wednesday, hopefully we will be broadcasting live from Victory Baptist Church if everything works correctly. We'll continue our series on Bible geography. Hopefully that goes well. And then we'll just see each day, each week. There's much uncertainty moving forward, but we will see. So there's kind of an update. And that's why we're doing the test tonight, because I have no idea if all the settings are correct, okay? But yeah, so the Spotify for podcasters, it's really cool. There's a lot of cool features to it, but I was doing these small tests, like these really small tests, and it was taking forever for it to upload it and convert it over to a file that I could edit. And I'm like, these are like 1 minute, 60 seconds, obviously 1 minute, 60 seconds, like a minute and 30 seconds, a minute and 40 seconds, maybe 2 minutes at the longest little test. And it was taking, if I do my normal length of broadcasting, which is basically an hour, let's say I do a 30 to 45 minute episode, that literally will take, it'll take most of the day trying to upload. And I'm like, no, not going to do that. I'm not going to sit there and have to wait. I'm going to find a different way to do this. So Spreaker is going to be our go-to. So the new podcast will be available via Spreaker, and then we'll put it on all the other podcasting platforms if that's the direction we go. So I'll keep you updated. You can always update me or ask me questions by emailing me at newsif@yahoo.com. That's news, the letters I and F, newsif@yahoo.com. We will see. So hopefully I'll be back in about an hour and a half, and I'll figure out what we're going to do tonight. Maybe we'll do something. Well, I think we'll do something. We'll get something done. Maybe nothing super long, but we'll do something, because I need a good broadcast. I do. I think the one earlier today was okay. I think it was pretty good. I'm still debating. I think I can pull up the audio from sermon audio from the sermon yesterday. I think I could. I don't know. I may pull that up. I don't know. We will see. And then there's some other ideas I have as well. So we'll look at that coming up this evening. So about 10 p.m. I'll be back. So thank you for listening to this test. Now I hope that everything is going to work out appropriately. I'm going to know in just a couple of seconds. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone have a great night. We'll be back hopefully in about an hour and a half. All right. God bless.